Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss No Country for Old Men, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Woody Harrelson, and Kelly MacDonald, directed by the Coen brothers. Now, I remember going to theaters for this, and what do I think of it? Well, it's going to be this thing the same as I think of now. So let's get into the movie. We open with a narration of Ed Tom Bell, played by Tommy Lee Jones, about he was a county sheriff of Texas since the age of 25, and the movie takes place in the year 1980, and we first meet Anton Chigurh, something like that, played by an Oscar-winning performance by Javier Bardem, being taken to the sheriff's office until the deputy is on the phone, and he manages to escape by putting the handcuffs behind his back to right in front of him and kills the deputy. I gotta say up front, this character who's a bad motherfucker, like a line one character will say later in the movie. I won't say when. I'll say when, but I won't say who yet. He'll kill you for inconveniencing him. And he leaves the sheriff's department and kills a man with the hose. That seems very dangerous, as this guy is a badass. Well, we get introduced to Llewellyn Moss, played by Josh Brolin, who just went out for hunting and hits an animal, and he tries to track it down, but can't seem to find it. But what does he find? Some dead men on a tree with their fire truck right next to them, along with some other trucks, as they're all dead except for one man in a truck, as well as the last guy who got out of the ambush. But he seems far away, and I really like the character of Anton because he's a badass motherfucker. And Llewellyn, as we follow most of the movie with him, until we get near the end of the movie, and I'll get there when I get there. And there was no score for this movie, except for when the credits roll, as that is what made this movie so fucking scary. And I admire what the Coen brothers did to make this movie more frightening, and in my opinion, Llewellyn finds the last guy who is unfortunately dead, as he takes all their guns and gets back home later at night and tells his wife Carla Jean, played by Kelly MacDonald from my very first retrospective series, Trainspotting, as she wonders where did Llewellyn get the pistol, and he says he found it earlier in the day, as she kept believing he bought the damn gun. Meanwhile, in the middle of the night, Llewellyn goes back to the crime scene to give the men he found some water, until the robbers come and flatten Llewellyn's tires and goes after him to kill him off, and he runs for his life and gets to the river until they send a dog after him to get Llewellyn, as Llewellyn gets out of the water and he loads the pistol to kill the dog. It was bad, so I'll forgive the movie for that. He was a bad dog. And escapes them for alive and stitches himself. And this is a very thrilling movie that scared the hell out of me from start to finish. Anton gets to the gas station and asks how much for the gasoline, and he scares this fucking shit out of the store clerk as he tosses up a coin and tells him to call it, and by definition either heads or tails. And the clerk calls heads, and he says well done because he saved his own fucking life. And thank God he saved his own damn life. And Anton says it's his lucky quarter to not put in his pocket. And we move on to Llewellyn being home and telling his wife that they have to move somewhere safer than where they're at in Texas. And we see Anton getting brought by the people robbing Llewellyn a few minutes ago, and he uses his tracker and kills the robbers, as we move on to Ed coming into work as the sheriff and finds Llewellyn's truck as well as the dead robbers along with his deputy. And I honestly like following the stories of Llewellyn and Anton more than Ed, as those scenes are what makes this movie intense and absolutely great as far as I'm concerned. Anton breaks into Llewellyn's trailer home and doesn't find him nor his wife Carla Jean, as he waits for them all day long to come get his money from the briefcase he found earlier in the movie, as Anton is told by the lady as the residents she can't give out no information, while Llewellyn puts Carla Jean on a bus to somewhere in New Mexico, and Ed and his deputy look for Llewellyn, and they can't find him either, as he left town. And the cinematography in this is by Roger Deakins, is phenomenal throughout, as Llewellyn takes a taxi cab to Regal Motel in Las Vegas, New Mexico. I don't know why there's a city called Las Vegas in New Mexico, but there might be such a place. I don't know. As he stays there for the day. and buys some new clothes at a store where he changes into them. And the screenplay, despite this is based on a book by Cormac McCarthy, is very well done. Ed hears from the deputy about Llewellyn's case while having some coffee while at a gun range. Llewellyn buys more guns for protection and loads up at another motel and buys a second room in case someone finds him, as Anton sees the Regal motel Llewellyn is staying at thanks to his tracker, and looks for him and tries to kill him with the sound effects. Work very well as far as scaring the hell out of the audience goes. And you can't predict what the fuck's going to happen throughout the movie. And I admire what the Coen brothers did. As I was on the edge of my seat the entire movie. It's very gripping. Like, there were times I was quiet, like I got scared. Llewellyn hears people getting killed and gets out of the motel and hitchhikes to a faraway place as he gets picked up by... And we move on to a meeting between Stephen Root, who plays a man who hires Carson Wells, played by Woody Harrelson, as he explains Anton is a psychopath to Stephen Root's character. And at first I didn't realize that was Stephen Root when I saw the movie, as I primarily know him from comedies. Like, I first saw him as Milton from Office Space, which I'm going to get to very soon. As Llewellyn gets to a motel and asks if anybody is looking for him to call him, while a cat in the front of the office drinking some milk from a bowl, as Llewellyn gets to his room and sees the money. He has a tracker as he finds it in the briefcase. And I got very worried for Llewellyn, as I was afraid he was going to get caught by Anton and killed by him. As he calls the front desk knowing something is wrong, and Llewellyn does a bunch of smart things, like checking onto the door, to pointing the gun at Anton, to turning out the light, as Anton doesn't see him there. And they get to a gunfire sequence I'll talk about in the next segment, but that was very fucking thrilling. Llewellyn escapes the motel room while Anton fires at him, and Llewellyn finds the cat is alive, but not the motel clerk, and he hides from Anton as there's no truck moving around until Llewellyn finds a truck as he hitchhikes to and says he wants to get out of town, until Anton tries to shoot Llewellyn dead, but he crashes the truck and gets into a dangerous gunfight game of cat and mouse. As Llewellyn wounds Anton in the leg, but doesn't necessarily kill him, as that's not an area where to get killed at. Well, I'm thinking, yeah, he'll survive, as he does for the rest of the movie. And Llewellyn parks the truck and goes to the border station between America and Mexico, and bumps into some guys as he'll offer them some money for a coat and a beer. And next thing you know, Llewellyn throws the briefcase to the other side of the fence and walks into Mexico, and wakes up in a town where some Mexican singers sing him Welcome to Mexico, and takes him to the hospital after he pays them and says Mexico in Spanish, as well as they wake him up. And that was very well directed by the Coen brothers. Anton puts a flame in the gas hole in a car and blows it up until going into a pharmacy to get some medicine for his leg. And the way Javier Bardem doesn't look back was a great shot, as this movie is filled with terrific shots throughout, as he goes to a motel room all bloodied up and puts on some plastic carpeting, I'll say, so he doesn't stain the carpet, and washes as well as stitches himself and pokes some fucking needles in him. And at this point I had to look away, because I have to confess, I hate needles, as those are my goddamn phobia of mine, as well as eyeballs. And this scene scared the shit out of me. And we move on to Ed as the sheriff's office, as the DEI agent is looking for Llewellyn, while his wife Loretta works for him, and he sees a dead body on the truck and follows the truck driver and sees what's wrong with the truck. And we move on to Llewellyn meeting Carson at the hospital, and Woody Harrelson says a line I brought up at the beginning of the show, that Anton will kill you for inconveniencing him. I believe that line, while he asks Llewellyn to give him the briefcase of money. But the bad news is, Llewellyn threw it on the border line between America and Mexico, in New Mexico. And this was well acted by Josh Brolin, who turned in some great work in this movie. And Woody Harrelson, who's barely in this movie. I'll explain in a few minutes, as Ed meets with Carla Jean in the diner where he had coffee at earlier. And the editing in this movie was very tightly done. Carson tries to look for the money, but he can't seem to find it until he does, and picks it up and goes back to his motel later at night. It finds Anton following him to his room, and they talk until Anton shoots Carson dead. And that's what I mean when I said Woody Harrelson had a brief role in this movie. And I thought, oh shit, Woody Harrelson had a graphic death scene in his motel room, and I actually liked that scene, and I'm a fan of Woody Harrelson in general. While the room gets smoky as Anton picks up the phone and talks to Llewellyn about meeting him somewhere, as Llewellyn refuses to meet with him as he offers him to bring the money to him while he doesn't have it, and slams the phone on Anton as their conversation was intense while Ed meets his deputy at the diner while reading the newspaper, and Llewellyn goes back to America and gets interrogated by a cross guard who goes hard ass on him and gets him back to America with some clothes, and gets to Texas and calls Carla Jean to meet her in the Desert Sales Motel in El Paso, Texas. And I'm enjoying this movie very much thus far, as this movie works for a cruel world it is today. Carla Jean takes her mother to El Paso, Texas by the bus, and she complains a hell of a lot about going to the bus station, as Carla Jean tells Ed to go to El Paso, Texas, where Llewellyn will be at, as Anton finds a mechanic and kills him off screen, as Llewellyn gets hit by a motel by a guest there while waiting up on his wife, and Ed gets to the motel where Llewellyn is at and sees he got killed, maybe by Anton, as it'll be revealed later at nighttime as we move on to Carla Jean hearing the bad news about her husband being dead, as Ed finds Llewellyn's dead body at an autopsy and meets with the DEI agent at a diner in El Paso. And Ed gets back to the motel and sees Anton is inside the room, and I'm thinking, oh shit, is Ed going to get killed by Anton? But luckily he never does, as he sees the lock being misplaced as he goes inside the crime scene and doesn't encounter Anton, and that was a very fucking scary scene. We get back to the town from earlier in the film as he visits a man full of cats in his house, Ed does, and has a chat with him about how Ed wants to quit as sheriff because he feels overmatched, and we move on to her mother's as well as Llewellyn's funeral, Carla Jean, as she finds Anton, and they talk about her husband and what he did to him, tries to call it, and tells her to call heads or tails, and she refuses it until Anton kills her off screen and leaves the house, and all of a sudden gets into a car accident. And a couple of kids come up to Anton, as a bone sticks out of his arm. I swear to God, it sounds disturbing, but that's what happened. As Anton takes one of the kids' shirt and walks away. And the final scene of the movie is Ed, who's retired now, shares two dreams with his wife, as he says in the first dream, he lost some money that his father had given him, and the second dream is Ed and his father riding some horses, as he knew he was going to die, and his father waits for him. And this climax was well acted, but the ending was very bad. As first off, Anton gets away with everything by the end of the movie, and second, the acting in this scene by Tommy Lee Jones was not his finest moment, nor was it his finest way to end the movie that I was enjoying throughout. But how much will I enjoy this movie, or will I give it a rating? Let's talk about it. I'll give this movie a 9.0 out of 10. If I ever do a Coen Brothers retrospective, this would be on the top of my list as their best films, in my opinion, as there's a damn good reason this won the Oscar for Best Picture of the Year in 2008. And I really liked following the stories of Llewellyn and Anton more than I liked following Ed, as Tommy Lee Jones is the top paid actor, and he's barely in this movie. And this movie was at times intense, horrifying, and thanks to the directing of the Coen Brothers and the choices they made throughout the movie, in my opinion. The cinematography by Roger Deakins is phenomenal throughout, as the screenplay, despite this is based on a book by Cormac McCarthy, is very well done, and the sound effects works for scaring the hell out of the audience as far as that goes. And I admire how the Coen Brothers brought the story to life as an intense movie. Like, you can't predict what the fuck's going to happen throughout the movie, and I admire what the Coen Brothers did, as I was on the edge of my seat this entire movie, as it was gripping. Like, there were times I got quiet because I got scared for the characters. What a great performance by the best supporting actor, Javier Bardem, as he was a badass who played a bad motherfucker for this whole movie, While, like I said, I liked following his story very much as the villains, as Josh Brolin turns in some great work as well. And this is a very well acted movie, as the editing in this movie is tightly done. But one criticism I have as well, maybe there's more than that, maybe like a couple, but the only one I'm going to talk about is it had a very bad ending, as I talked about it a few minutes ago. And I'm not going to explain it again, all again, but otherwise, this is a strong recommendation for this movie, as it may end in tragedy, but it works for the world as a cruel place as it is today. And this is a very great movie, with the exception of the ending. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review. And until then, good night.